Hello YouTube, Robin Hood Bricks here, and I think you can tell it's going to be awesome already. Yes, today we're going to be building a classic space inspired build. A good while back, I was actually given a challenge by one of my subscribers to create a train wagon for my incredibly long cargo train that was classic space themed. So that is what we're going to do today. So before I forget, I'll give you your bedoing for an awesome idea. And that means that we're going to be using lovely old grey bricks, lovely blue bricks, and lovely trans yellow as well, being the three main sort of colours of the classic space theme. And I suppose this build also celebrates the fact that we're going to have kind of a new classic space set, if that's possible, with the set 10497 Galaxy Explorer being released this summer, which I definitely want to get. Maybe not for including in the city, because it doesn't quite fit, but then again, maybe I should glue it to the ceiling, who knows. But mainly because of the massive nostalgia value that it'll have for me and anyone who was around when, well, for me the tail end of classic space was brand new. I suppose the only real shame with that new set is that it uses light bluish grey rather than this old grey, which isn't actually very accurate, but it is very understandable. To be fair, old grey is a little bit drab by contrast, so yeah, probably a good move. Anyway, for today's build, I basically went through all of the classic space sets through the catalogue. I use brickset.com for that sort of a job, just to kind of skim through all of those wonderful, fabulous old sets to get some inspiration for my build today. And there are so many wonderful ideas to choose from, and I really did have carte blanche with what I was going to create. But it did occur to me that it'd be nice to get a bit of motion involved, much like my cement mixer wagon, or maybe my toxic waste wagon as well. So basically, I landed, no pun intended, on the set Space Supply Station from 1983, which is set 6930, because wow, it's just absolutely amazing. Quite simple, but very interesting with all of its different buggies, those two flying ships above their landing pads, the sort of weird cockpit sort of bits on the right there. I don't know what's really going on in those little cockpits. They kind of just sort of seem to have a spaceman sitting in them. Maybe they're kind of offices for space admin or something like that. But I did think that was an absolutely awesome set. I never had that one. I didn't know anyone who did have it either. So it also has that kind of, intangible sort of value to me that it's something unobtainable. But it also, for today's build, was quite a good idea because it had on it something that I could recreate in those little sort of space ships, those sort of almost space hoppers that are on the top, that are kind of the right scale for inclusion in my build. Because if you think about it, on a train build that's only 6 wide, there's only so much you can really include. So I need something quite small and discreet. So I thought I would first of all build kind of some modernized, but using old pieces, spaceship or space hoppers, and then try and build a wagon around them, kind of with a launching pad, so they could be being transported and, well, maybe tested along their journey. So let's start with one of those space hoppers. Now, to be in keeping with the classic space theme, I do need my space hopper to be very simple. I am going to embellish it on the original quite a bit, but still it can't be a great big heavy thing because I also need it to be bouncing around, so it needs to be quite light. And I also am quite limited by the pieces that are available, both by rarity and by cost, because some of these parts are in such high demand or in such scarcity that they're virtually impossible to get hold of. So I've even got one of these dish pieces in a period incorrect dark bluish grey, but I think it looks very good, so I'm not too bothered. I've managed to get everything else in either old light grey or old dark grey, like this control yoke here. So I'm just going to build a pretty simple version of the one that we had before, but I'm going to be adding things like these green guns on, because basically that was done on a few sets of the period. And I'm also going to sort of pinch ideas from similar sort of hopper type sets that weren't used in the Space Supply Station, like adding these megaphone pieces to these holes on the side of this space chair, as I see it, just to make it even more fun. And then why not a rocket engine on the back as well for propulsion? Because, I mean, we should use every flat surface that's available. Then when I add a little jet to the bottom, like that, and the yoke to the front, we're already there, and we've got a rather impressive looking, packed and stacked, if you will, little hopper. I really like it. Now, I suppose in an ideal world that would be old grey, but in a way, the dark bluish grey gives it a good bit of contrast, actually. So I don't mind that too much. So let's get our red classic spaceman. And these are quite hard to get, especially with a good quality print on the stomach as well. I think that was arguably harder than everything else. I suppose we'll be getting some newer ones now, so they'll become less rare, at least on the torso. But then again, they'll have the new style helmet, and this is a proper original classic space one, and then it's got the old style helmet as well. So move his hands onto the two antenna sort of controls, and we've got our little hopper. And I think he looks rather fantastic, very cute, very nostalgic, so I really like him. But given we're going to have a 6-wide build, he's about the right proportions, kind of in that direction. But given it can be about, 16 studs long, well, he's going to be kind of lost in it, isn't he? So maybe, just maybe, we need a second one. So here's another one that I made earlier. And this one is exactly the same, except for the fact that, as you can tell, it's got a yellow classic spaceman on. And I wanted a black one, ideally, because that's the only one I don't have now. But then again, the yellow one I do have is from one of those more recent Lego Movie inspired ones with Benny the Spaceman in. So basically, it's got the modern style yellow helmet. So I guess this is my only other classic spaceman. So yeah, there we go. So this is stage 1 complete. 2 identical hoppers being tested on the back of a wagon. So now we need to include all of those blue, grey and trans yellow pieces and make kind of a platform for this, much like the landing pad on the supply station, to kind of, constrain these things, contain their movement and, allow the testing to proceed while they're on their way to, wherever they're going. Cool. Now, my very first idea for capturing some motion in this wagon was to use what I often do, this kind of gearbox piece that can transfer some of the motion from the wheels via a couple of beveled gears into a turning motion that can go up through the surface of the train carriage and turn something round and round. And I thought it'd be really fun to have these basically on their 2 landing pads side by side, probably not going in the same direction, but kind of in towards the middle like that, so it looked a bit dizzying and weird. But then I thought, technically I've done that exact build before with the toxic waste carrier wagon, and I figured maybe I should do something a little bit different. So another idea that I came onto was actually having kind of the axle that's going around with the wheels, having something on it, basically a lump that would then push a ball on the end of another one up every time it went around. So you'd end up with kind of a vertical sort of bump motion. So it'd be down for about 3/4 of the turn and then it just sort of pop up. And that would mean that one of the two could maybe just be going hiccup, 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 while the other one's sort of doing turn, turn, turn. I thought that would be very space-like in a way, having one doing each different motion. But then when I sort of tried that with random pieces before I got all these hard to find ones on some brick hauls, and it kind of looked a bit confused having them doing different motions. And it was very much quite funny, actually, the fact that one was going up and down, because you would also get a little bit of a random turn each time. So when this thing sort of got hit by the kind of bit that was hitting it from underneath, it not only would hiccup upwards, but it would sort of bounce and sort of pop and sort of land at a different angle each time. And that just made for the motion to be really quite interesting. And when they were both doing it, they're both getting affected in different ways. And it was kind of like they were malfunctioning, if I'm honest about it. So basically, I think that was so good, and Mrs. Hood definitely gave it her thumbs up, that I thought, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have them both bobbing around, and then, it'll be different for my train, and it'll also be the most funny. So let's get building that wagon. Good. Well, this is the simple mechanism that I've come up with to get that bouncing motion. And apologies, it's all in black. It's a bit hard to see, I suppose, but you can probably make out that there are a pair of train wheels on an axle. And with the help of some spaces in the middle there, they're turning around this too long Technic support arm. And that just means when it's in a vertical position, it will cause that hiccup. And for the other 3/4 of the turn, it'll do absolutely nothing. And that's just encapsulated in some 1x4 plates and some inverted slopes. So we'll need 2 of those, one for each hopper on each end. And I can join those together using a 4x4 plate to make the very bottom of our chassis. And it was very important when building this to give enough clearance to these moving parts, because otherwise they'll clash on something and won't go around at all. So it was really probably the hardest bit in designing this, giving it some strength whilst also allowing for the mechanism to still continue to work. So I'm going to strengthen that with some corner plates on the 4 corners and 1x10s as well down the sides. And that will give it a lot more strength, I think, than what it's currently got. And the 2 aren't linked, so when they go round, they could go round in unison, kind of like that seems to be pretty much. But then basically, if you just give one a half turn and do the same thing, he says, getting them in unison again, then they'll be slightly staggered. So, you know, it just be random each time where it starts off and where it ends up, because I kind of think it'll look best if they're kind of not in complete phase. So that's good. So I'm going to add a couple more plates in the middle. Then I'm going to add an absolute load of 1x4 plates as well to give it more strength and a little bit more height as well. And now you can see I can just start to put some plates in that area there, because another thing that was really hard to incorporate with this mechanism was the buffer pieces, because obviously they're very inflexible indeed, and having them here, they just don't get hit, but they're only supported on 2 of the 4 normal sort of stud points. But that's why I'll be clamping them in a minute, so they're nice and strong still. Then we've left a little space in the middle just so I can add what I usually do in these bracket pieces, just so we can have some detail added on in the sides as well. And there is the black section, very hard to see, with the movement in there, if you can see that, before we put on the old grey layer for the kind of flatbed section. And that will be largely based on these, which I got in the last brick haul, these old grey Technic plates. These were one of the hard things to get hold of, and they are so one of my axles can go in a hole right above where it needs to be. So 2 of those, and then got some 2x6s in old grey with a couple of 1x2 plates underneath, just to make everything look neat. And indeed, it's hard building with old pieces as well, because they're not all available. I mean, to get a 2x16 plate, for example, in old grey is practically impossible. They're really expensive if you do find one. So basically, doing a slightly different combination of plates like I am here just, well, made it a bit easier to actually buy for. So the design probably went through a few phases of sort of redesign just to accommodate the hard to find pieces not being available. So there is our flatbed. And then just to finish the mechanism, we need a bit more support. So a bit of a brick that I had that was possible to use here was this one in old grey. That is new dark bluish grey, but can't really be avoided. And that can just go above each of the axles as well. So when each axle is being pushed by the mechanism, it isn't sort of leaning one way or the other, so it's got a nice smooth motion. So if I add a couple of Technic axles into these holes, there's a 4 long one and a 5 long one, then hopefully, yeah, you'll see them going up and down like pistons in an engine. So I'll just turn one so it's slightly off phase. There we go. Now that is exactly what I'm going for. That looks awesome. So this is going to be really fun. I think you can tell already. So that's the mechanism working. Now what we need to do is make this look much more classic space by adding all of those details and loads of sort of computer screens and printed bricks and all the rest of it to make it look really techy, like it's a sort of testing bed. Well, that's the hard bit done, to be honest, the mechanism. But now we get to do the fun part, decorating it with all those old parts. And one part that I didn't find very hard to get, but found it quite hard to incorporate, was this one. just because it's kind of an odd shape and it kind of gets in the way wherever you put it, either of the mechanism or maybe the motion of the train wagon itself. But one place that I found it really could fit was kind of here as some side decor. And if I use a pair of them, then I think that's a really interesting shape, looking like some sort of venting or ducting or something like that in there. And I am going to use a blue grill piece here just to fill up the remaining two studs there. And arguably that wasn't in classic space, at least until the very end perhaps. But much like the new Galaxy Explorer set, I am going to use a few modern pieces that would have been used in classic space had they been around. So I'm just going to do the same on the other side. And also that does just avoid those wheels. It almost looks like it clashes, but they come in at that point fortuitously. So basically that's all good. And it still meets my clearance requirements for going through my tunnels and bridges. So yeah, I really like that already. It's starting to look a bit more industrial. Then I wanted to get some colour in. And the main accent colour for classic space just has to be this trans yellow. Usually it's sort of on the top of cockpits and so on, but I'm just going to use it as some side bits. And you can see the Technic axle hole there, but I think that adds to a bit of interest really. And I'm going to use much more of those grill pieces just to fill in the gaps of the studs on these raised areas, because they're a little ugly, but it will still look quite industrial, I think. So there's that. Yes, starting to look very classic space. Next section, I wanted some of these screens on because they're very iconic indeed. So I kind of want one of those facing each way so we can always see one of them. And basically, maybe they have to type in the program, or maybe it's just recording the data that's going on with the testing. And then a steering wheel in blue, kind of on each side. Maybe that's to turn on the cooling system or something like that. And then these I don't think were available at Classic Space era either, 1x2 tiles in trans colours, but I kind of figured that would be more of the contrast colour in the middle, just to take away those studs. So yeah, I think that's the middle section sorted. Then, much like the original, I wanted to have kind of some slopes going up to each of the pads to make them look like it was a sort of raised landing pad. So I'm going to use these 1x3 slopes in blue. I think that Space Supply Station had them in white, did it? Anyway, it's the same sort of build with 1x6 tiles making up the remaining bits. It's a really interesting shape. Yeah, I like that. Looks pretty industrial to me. This will be a good link between my train and my space tower, of course, which has got a classic space floor on it with all these classic spacemen. And there we go. Look at that. Two definite landing pads with some computer equipment and steering wheels in the middle. Looking good. But I do have some spare space at the ends. And this is where some printed bricks come in. I had the choice of using two of these. They used to be gold on that planet, but now in a way they look more like the moon, so it's kind of quite good still. And these wonderful down arrows as well, which are very characteristic of that era. And I couldn't really make up a choice. So I thought, well, you know what I'll do? I'll have them back to back so you can see one from one side and the other from the other when you are seeing this going around. And I'll use more of the accent colour and one more of the grill pieces. And then I can do the exact opposite for the other side and have that there. So we'll always see the Classic Space logo and the down arrow. And that's a bit greedy, but that's good because we want it packed and stacked. So there is our wonderful carriage base, and it's quite low profile, but I think that's good because all the interest is in these things, of course. And when I just tested that, I had in a 4 long axle and a 5 long because I thought it's better to have them in different heights as well to give them a bit of variation. But I think that's too short, so I'm going to have a 5 and a 6 instead. So they just need to rest in there, but I think it's probably best I attach them firmly to the underside of each hopper first. So we'll have the red one in there, ta-da, and the yellow one, on the taller one, in there. So he's quite high up, isn't he? So what we hope we'll see here is not only the up and down motion of each of these, but some change in direction as well. So here we go. Ooh. Yeah, you see, every now and then they just sort of spin a little. How cool is that? You moved quite a bit that time. So I think this is going to be really good on my train. And it's definitely very fun. I think you'll agree. These classic spacemen having great fun on their space hoppers with jet engines and guns and all sorts of other things. The computer equipment, the piping, all of the wonderful iconography of the era. And that motion, I mean, that just is fantastic. You must agree. I think if you don't enjoy that, then, well, you can't have any Lego soul. Anyway, the proof of the pudding is really going to be attaching this to my cargo train and seeing it in motion without me pushing it along. But if it works anything like this, I'm going to be very happy indeed. Awesome. All right, into the Lego room, and there it is, joined onto my incredibly long cargo train. And I think it looks really cool as it is just in static phase, let alone when it's moving along. Yeah, I really like that. And you can tell immediately that it's classic space with all those bricks and the colours involved. Really like it. So I've put it next to my other moving wagon, the toxic waste carrier, which has got those spinning flames on the top. Other moving ones include the cement mixer one, where the drum spins. And then we've got the pump wagon, which is right at the end. So where's that? I can just see it in between the castle and Major Oak Hill. And that's because my cargo train goes all the way around there, all the way down here, all the way around here to there. So essentially, it must be covering about 2/3 of my cargo loop at the moment. It's kind of an unofficial target that I get this chasing its own tail around the loop. But anyway, I'll keep building regardless and see if I hit that target as an extra bonus. So this is looking really good. One thing I didn't show you in the build process was these pieces. I was going to include some old grey aerials, but if you look at the state of them, I just can't include them really. I think it's hard to get one of these pieces that hasn't been chewed because they must be really, really helpful to the design process in stimulating the brain, sucking on one of these whilst you're working. So yeah, I'll keep an eye out for more of these, but I'm not hopeful. Right, so let's get this thing going because the proof is going to be in the pudding of the motion being converted. So let's give the 4 locomotives and 6 motors some welly. And, oh, they're off. Oh, they're both hopping around like mad. They're a bit noisier than I thought they were going to be. Let's wait for them to come around, or maybe we can catch them on the far side. Where are they? Oh, there they are. Going through the tunnels now. Oh, wow, yeah. That is a surprise, actually. When I'm doing it by hand, that is hilarious, though. You've got to admit, that is funny. And they do turn. They do seemingly turn at random. They're all. Oh, there we go. Really good spin there. Okay, so the mechanism is 100% working very well, but it's a lot noisier than I thought it would be because when I've been testing it by hand, well, it hasn't had this extra force, and it really does sort of thud back down to earth, doesn't it? So, yeah, I love it, but I may have created one of the most annoyingly noisy train carriages known to man. Oh yeah, that is hilarious though. I've got to keep it, haven't I? Oh, I don't think it will be quite as popular as the pump wagon because that is just genius, if I do say so myself. But it is certainly up there. So let's see it coming around again. I was going to get the other train going as well, but this is just too fun to watch. Yeah, that is great, but that noise. Is that going to be too annoying? Do tell me what you think. You must admit it's very fun though. Very fun indeed. Well, I love it when a plan comes together, and I think you'll agree that I have achieved my target, and I have achieved the challenge of creating a classic space-themed wagon for my cargo train. It's just, well, that it's quite noisy as well. Oh wow, that just cheers me up every time I see it. Brilliant. God, it keeps going, doesn't it? There we go. Well, another challenge done, and I really like the look of that. Sometimes I get challenges and I just think, well, that's just silly. Other times I get them, I think, that might be the greatest idea that's ever been made. I have to do it, and I get really sort of energized by it and can't think of much else. This one's been a bit of a chore in a way, getting all the pieces, I must say. They've been spread over about 10 brick hauls, which is why there's been such a time gap between receiving that challenge and doing it. But I think the proof is in the pudding. And that looks absolutely great. And the motion, wow. I was right to get them both bobbing, wasn't I, rather than spinning. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. It is appreciated. Do remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome LEGO videos. Do also tell me whether you really like this or I've missed some vital classic space piece that I should have included. And if you value this channel, there are many ways in which you can support it. Do check out the links in the description below, especially if you're planning to buy the expensive releases this summer, like the roller coaster and the new castle. It would be great if you could use my link and then just change the region to your region and then go ahead as usual. That would be fantastic. And next time on Robin Hood Bricks, we'll be doing a brick haul. I think I'm going to do a Bricklink package and one that I've received to my address, and you can send in a package for a future brick haul if you want to the usual address. And then on Friday, we'll do another MOC build that won't be train-based. And then on Monday, well, who knows? So until all that, see you! Yeah, this is great. Let's get it going again. Hop, 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 hop.